the course of tomorrow, once again, plenty of blustery winds across Scotland with a risk of coastal gales, and we'll continue to see that cloud spill in from the northwest with some outbreaks of rain, particularly by the afternoon. Western parts of Northern Ireland and northwestern parts of Scotland seeing some heavy downpours by the time we reach the afternoon. Otherwise, mostly dry elsewhere and feeling pleasant where you catch the sunshine.
Despite the morning rain, it'll be a nice, warm, cosy day ahead. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
This is the final week to grab your chance to win a whopping £36,000 cash in the Great British Giveaway. That's like having £3,000 each month for an entire year. Extra cash in your bank account that you can do whatever you like with. Make sure you don't miss out. Get your entry in now. Just one entry could make you the winner. For another chance to win £36,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2, or post your name and number to GB08 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close 5 PM this Friday. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, Georgia. Your story is incredible. Just remind us of it. You quit running in, was it 2017? Because I mean, to be quite frank, your body was knackered, you had injuries, you thought you couldn't go on anymore. But then you started running again at Parkrun in 2022. And of course, this summer at the Olympics, you won bronze.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah, it has been a bit of a journey. And yeah, there was a period of time where I stopped running completely. And then Parkrun was just something I got into with my friends, my family, just local community. And I started to see the improvements that led me to get back in contact with my old coach and just worked my way back up to elite level running and got a bronze medal this summer in Paris.
Did you ever think that would happen when you were beginning to take part in parkruns again? Did you ever think you'd be winning bronze in the 1500 metres at the Olympics?
No, not at all. It would have been absolutely bonkers, I think, to think that at the time. It was just building my way up, but it was all about finding happiness in running again. And that's really what parkrun does, I think, really well.
And can you just tell us and the audience what had happened to you in 2017?
So I had been like a good junior athlete. I had gone over to the US on a track scholarship at university, and I just experienced so many different injuries. So various stress fractures in my shins, and I just graduated and just thought there's no way I can run anymore. So took a big break, and then yeah, over the past few years, I just got back into running slowly, built it up, and parkrun is just something that is on every Saturday. So many parks across the UK, very accessible, free. So it was just a really good way to get back into a fun but semi-level of competitive running.
The People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 1 o'clock on Wednesday, the 23rd of October. I'm Emily Carver.
And I'm Tom Harwood.
Trump rages at Labour. The Trump campaign accuses the far-left Labour Party of interfering in the US election. But Keir Starmer insists he still has a good relationship with Donald Trump. This despite the former president filing an extraordinary legal complaint against the British governing party.
It comes as Lord Wahid Ali, the very generous Labour Party donor, has been forced to apologise after he was found to have breached House of Lords rules on 4 separate occasions. How will Keir Starmer react?
And Sergeant Martin Blake has been forced into hiding with a £10,000 bounty on his head. He was cleared of murdering gangster Chris Kaba on Monday. The BBC reports black communities in South London have been left traumatised by the incident.
And which English council is forcing all cabbies, including native English speakers, to take English language tests or lose their licence? We'll speak to one taxi driver outraged by these new rules. It's risky, isn't it, for the Prime Minister to really make an enemy of Donald Trump quite so early on. He was making overtures only a few weeks ago, and now there's a legal case.
Yeah, I mean, Keir Starmer would obviously say, well, he has said, you know, these people aren't representative of my position. They're just members of the Labour Party who want to do something in their spare time, go off to the United States,
Facilitated
help Kamala
by
Harris's
employees
campaign.
of the Labour Party.
I know, it doesn't look good. It just looks rather silly as well. Just rather silly. The Labour have only just been elected. They are now the governing party of this country, seen to be interfering in a foreign election, just as President Trump may well become the next president of the United States. I mean, it's not the smartest thing to do, is it, really?
What do you think? gbnews.com/your say is the way to get involved on this and all the other stories we cover today. But before that, let's dive into your headlines with Sam Francis.
Very good afternoon to you. It is just after 1 o'clock. Let's start this hour with some breaking news coming to us out of Dorset this afternoon, that a major incident has been declared in Swanage, where a care home, we understand, has been evacuated due to what is a suspected carbon monoxide leak. That care home has reportedly 48 residents, all of them elderly, some with dementia. At this stage, there are some unconfirmed media reports that 3 people may have died in that incident. The exact nature, though, of the incident remains at this stage unclear. We are keeping across any details coming into us. Authorities, though, in Swanage are urging the public to avoid the area as that situation develops. The details we do have are that the South Western Ambulance Service responded at around 5:20 this morning. They dispatched hazard response teams, 10 double-crewed ambulances, and later the fire service there also arrived with various crews from other locations across Hampshire as well. So that latest detail coming into us on that situation developing in Dorset. We will keep across it for you and bring you any more details. Turning though now to the House of Commons, where Angela Rayner's been filling in for Sir Keir Starmer at Prime Minister's questions. The Deputy Prime Minister came under pressure for more action against what Labour MP Mike Tapp called evil smuggling gangs after the deadly sinking of a migrant boat in the English Channel this morning. In response, Ms Rayner insisted the government is establishing a credible plan to protect UK borders.
These are people, women, children. We are putting in place a credible plan to protect our borders and remove those with no right to be here by setting up our Border Security Command, backed by £75 million of investment, and we're working with our international partners to target and disrupt the criminal smuggling gangs.
And some breaking news again, just on the topic of those migrants crossing the Channel. We're hearing from our Home and Security editor Mark White that a third body has now been recovered from the English Channel after that migrant boat sinking, discussed there during Deputy Prime Minister's questions. A passing ferry, we're understanding from the French Coast Guard, say that the third victim was recovered after a body was spotted floating in the water this afternoon. We're also hearing a fourth migrant has been taken to hospital for treatment after being pulled from the water earlier this morning. That boat had around 50 people on board when it went down, leaving many stranded in the water. There were also reports that 2 other migrant boats were making that journey across the Channel at the same time. Rescue services, of course, remaining on high alert, closely monitoring the situation. As we heard from Tom and Emily at the top of the hour, Labour peer Lord Ali is facing fresh criticism after a report has revealed 4 minor breaches in the registration of his interests. The House of Lords Commissioner for Standards found that he failed to register himself as an unremunerated director of a foundation and neglected to maintain accurate records for a company he controlled. However, the Commissioner deemed them minor, requiring only a letter of apology, which Lord Ali has now provided. In that letter, he's acknowledged the breaches and said he regrets the oversight. 2 survivors of the Manchester Arena bombing have won their High Court harassment case against a former TV producer who claims the attack was staged. Martin Hibbert and his daughter Eve, who suffered life-changing injuries, sued Richard Hall after he published videos and a book alleging the bombing was a hoax. Mr Hall claimed his actions, including filming Eve outside her home, were in the public interest as a journalist and that, quote, millions of people have bought a lie about the attack. However, the court ruled in their favour, dismissing Hall's claims as unfounded. Sir Keir Starmer insists his relationship with Donald Trump is intact despite claims that Labour interfered in the US election. Trump's campaign filed a complaint accusing Labour of illegally supporting Kamala Harris, citing meetings between senior Labour officials and the Vice President's team. Starmer, though, has dismissed the claims, stating that Labour members are in the US voluntarily, as they have done in previous elections. He emphasised his personal rapport with Trump and recalled their meeting in New York and said he will work with whoever becomes the next US president. In France, Gilles Pellicot, the French woman at the centre of a landmark trial of 50 men who are accused of raping her, has taken to the stand today, sending a powerful message to survivors of sexual violence. After being drugged and assaulted by her then-husband, she's standing against the men accused of her abuse. In her testimony, the 72-year-old urged other victims to shed their shame and said, quote, "It's not for us to have shame, it's for them to have shame." Well, with an open trial and showing of evidence, Giselle hopes that she can inspire other survivors. And before I go, the Environment Secretary has said today that he had no idea football tickets he accepted were linked to a polluting UK water firm. Steve Reed was questioned here on GB News this morning over £2,000 worth of tickets from a firm with ties to Northumbrian Water, one of the three companies the water regulator has ruled not fit for purpose. Speaking on Breakfast this morning, Reed had this to say.
Those tickets were from a telecoms company, not a water company, so your facts, I'm afraid, are wrong, and your inference is wrong too, because I would hardly be taking the toughest action against water company and water company bosses of any Secretary of State in history if I had been in any way influenced by a telecom company offering me a pair of football tickets. I wasn't, and you can judge me by what I'm doing in Parliament and the reform I'm leading in the water sector. You've not seen that from any previous Environment Secretary ever.
That's it from me for now. I'll be back with you in around half an hour. Now, though, it's back to Tom and Emily.
Good afternoon, Britain. It is 8 minutes past 1, and in the last hour, a watchdog has found that Labour donor Lord Ali breached 4 parliamentary rules over his registration of interests and has subsequently apologised, saying he regrets the oversight, saying he will endeavour to avoid such circumstances again.
OK, well, this follows the news that Donald Trump's campaign team have made a formal legal complaint against Labour over what they call blatant foreign interference in the US election, taking place in less than 2 weeks now.
Well, the complaint's main focus is on Labour volunteers who have arrived in the United States to campaign for Kamala Harris.
Yes, well, joining us now is GB News political correspondent Olivia Utley. Olivia, let's start with that breaking news that Lord Wahid Ali, the very generous Labour Party donor, has been found to have breached the rules, the sleaze rules, conduct rules, 4 times.
Well, yes, this is all a little bit embarrassing for the Labour Party and, of course, for Lord Ali himself. He's been found by the Lords Conduct Committee to have committed 4 breaches of regulation. He didn't register his interest correctly on 4 different occasions. It's things like he declared himself as a trustee correctly of a particular foundation, but he didn't declare that he was also an unremunerated director. The Baroness in charge of this review into Lord Ali's conduct concluded that each of the 4 breaches in themselves were minor, but because there were 4 of them, she recommended that Lord Ali write a letter apologising to the Conduct Committee. Lord Ali has now written that letter, and it is, to all intents and purposes, the end of the matter. That said, this was a hugely embarrassing episode for Keir Starmer, coming so early on in his tenure as Prime Minister, and the very mention of Lord Ali in the headlines again is something which I'm sure the Prime Minister will not be welcoming, particularly as this is a very difficult few days for him. Donald Trump has said that Labour activists who are going over to the States to campaign for Kamala Harris in the run-up to the election are breaking the rules, and he's actually made an official report against the Labour Party. Now, Angela Rayner and Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, are still stuck on this plane to Samoa, which takes 28 hours. Angela Rayner and the Prime Minister have both both said that activists are allowed to travel in their free time using their own resources. But Donald Trump might be right. There might just be a case against him. Now, that case would be that activists who go over to the States aren't allowed to donate to the party. Now, there's no suggestion that any of these 100 activists have made actual physical donations to the Democrat Party. But if their plane tickets are found to cost over either £1,000 or $1,000, I can't quite remember, but then that would count as a donation to the campaign. There is another issue too at play, which is that these 100 or so activists haven't sort of self-organised this. It's actually been conducted, the organisation of the trip has been put into place by a pretty senior member of the Labour Party, Sophia Patel, their head of operations. Now, it could be that the body investigating this actually finds that that too amounts to a breach of the code. So on the face of it, it looks as though Keir Starmer and Angela Rayner's defence is pretty valid. But it could be that once the details have been dug into, another sort of minor breach, if you like, similar to what's going on with Lord Ali, could be found. And of course, in the long term, that could seriously damage Keir Starmer's relationship with the future President Donald Trump, if that's what comes to pass.
Absolutely. It seems like a tricky path to tread, particularly looking at the polls in the United States right now. This is a coin toss. It's 50-50, practically. Olivia Utley, thank you so much for joining us live from our Westminster studio.
OK, well, for more on this, let's speak to the chief political correspondent at The Times, Aubrey Allegretti. Aubrey, let's start with that breaking news regarding Lord Ali and his breaches of certain rules. How serious is this?
Well, I think it was summarised very well by Olivia there. Obviously, in and of themselves, these breaches are not necessarily significant. In one case, he failed to declare that he was an unremunerated, i.e. unpaid director of something. But I think the issue is twofold. One, that Labour has really struggled to sort of pull itself out of the row over cronyism and sleaze and standards ever since Keir Starmer got elected. And two, that because the Labour Party was so, if you like, critical of the Conservatives for all of their behaviour and actions during the course of the last Parliament, that if there is anything which is not sort of done whiter than white, then this comes back to bite them. And so I suspect ultimately Keir Starmer will be very frustrated that he is heading on yet another foreign trip where this is dominating the headlines. I've travelled with the Prime Minister twice since he came into number 10, and continually there's been a sort of drip feed of stories about Lord Ali and donations to the Labour Party. I'm told that next week we're going to get a sort of update to the rules on what hospitality MPs can get and how they declare it. And that should, I'm told, improve the system significantly. It will be much more transparent. People will be able to declare monthly hospitality they've received. Currently, that's not required if you're a minister. So Labour, I think, will be trying to say that actually they are reforming the system for the better. It just takes some sort of initial political pain while you're being transparent about it.
Just on that, do we have an idea whether Lord Ali has, taken a little pause with the generous donations for a bit while his name has been all over the press for however many weeks it's been? Do we have that, or would we need a few months to get those registered donations public?
Yeah, it's not entirely clear. I mean, he has donated significant sums. I mean, I think it's £700,000 over the last 20 years. But now I'm speaking to so many ministers, cabinet ministers, MPs and special advisors who say, I am turning down the offer of gifts and hospitality because even if I think that they are legitimate, i.e. they might be necessary or to do with my job or my role or my ministerial portfolio, I just don't want to give any impression that I'm taking freebies or handouts. And so actually there's been a sort of real shift to push back on any offers that have been made.
Well, this is the bonkers thing to some extent about the whole scandal, that this is fairly standard for ministers to, or indeed for MPs to go to football games in their own constituency or whatever else has to be or happens to be. And perhaps quite properly, whenever a minister or a Labour MP is asked about this, they will say, I've declared this all in the proper way, this has been properly registered, I've been open and transparent about this. So a new system for ministers whereby they can be more transparent about this, whereby journalists can look every single month at what is being declared. I mean, perhaps this won't end the issue. This could exacerbate it.
Certainly, and there are some Conservative MPs who are slightly worried. They saw hospitality and gifts as being a sort of perk of the job, and they thought that they were going into opposition. Some of them aren't expecting to go back into the shadow cabinet, and so they're sort of slightly frustrated that there is such a great deal of scrutiny being placed on this issue now. And I mean, to take one example, one MP was saying to me, well, if Rachel Reeves buys her sister Ellie Reeves a Christmas present, do they have to declare it in their register of interests? So, there is the question about where the line should fall in this debate. And currently we're obviously having it, but it's still not clear where the public is comfortable with it lying.
And Aubrey, turning our attention to this Donald Trump, Keir Starmer, Labour Party row, have the Labour Party made a big mistake over this, encouraging people to go over to the United States and campaign for Kamala?
Well, certainly the Labour Party has sought to sort of distance itself from its head of operations, who seemed to be masterminding and coordinating efforts to get activists from the party over to the US to support Kamala Harris. I'm told that there are still councillors, Labour staffers, and indeed parliamentary assistants to MPs who are planning to go and support the Democrats. However, obviously, this isn't a sort of novel experience. The Conservatives do the same thing as well. I know of some Conservative staff who have been out to the US to work for Donald Trump's team during this election campaign. And of course, this is something that's happened many times before, bar 2020 when there was the COVID pandemic. Now, there are also Labour MPs asking questions about how, for example, Liz Truss and Nigel Farage have been prominent supporters of Donald Trump's and travelled out to the US to support him. So they're questioning whether it's really fair. But I think in this instance, there is a perception issue, which is that a very senior Labour official and senior government advisors who are named by Trump's campaign in their legal filing are seen to be supporting the Democrats. And behaviour that might have been more acceptable when Labour were in opposition is proving to be quite difficult for them now that they're in government.
Yeah, that's the key point for me. They're not in opposition now. They're not an activist party anymore. They're, the governing party of this country. And, Keir Starmer can say how much of a good relationship he has with Donald Trump and how he'll work with any president of the United States, whether they're blue or red. But, I mean, with this going on, it makes it a little less believable, doesn't it?
And you have to look at what happened in 2016 when Bernie Sanders reportedly had to pay a $14,000 fine after Australian Labour Party supporters went over to campaign in his primary campaign. So the
Aussies are at it as well.
So Bernie Sanders had to pay a fine for this sort of activity. Of course, the line will come on whether or not there's been money involved. But it does show that this is not a new issue and has been one that's fallen into that sort of trouble before.
Aubrey Allegretti, thank you very much indeed for speaking with us, Chief Political Correspondent at The Times. Great to have you on. Yes. Starmer denies this row will damage relationship with Mr. Trump. He's calling the party far left.
Donald Trump has tried to sue Keir Starmer. There's a legal letter. How is this not damaged? I mean, this is just completely living on a planet if he's saying this hasn't damaged that sort of relationship.
And he's on a flight to Samoa. 28 hours.
Well,
hope
it's got Wi-Fi.
Yeah, I hope it's got Wi-Fi. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Stay with us as we look at the brand new defence pact signed between the UK and Germany. What does this mean for our security? Why do we need this security pact with Germany? That's to come after this.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg and this is GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
This week, Free Speech Brighton, a sister group of the Free Speech Union, claimed that they were kicked out of a pub in the city for discussing trans issues in schools. The group booked a room in a pub for an evening of speeches and discussion when they claimed security guards came and asked them to leave after one speaker began to talk about this topic. Now, a clip of the evening was, in fact, posted to social media. Can you give us some background to what happened, what the event was for, and why you booked it?
Our normal pub was being refurbished, so about 3 weeks ago I went in and booked a local pub for a meeting, and they didn't ask any questions about what sort of meeting. It was in a back room. It was mainly secluded from the rest of the pub, so I thought it would be fine. But anyway, they didn't ask any questions. They took my booking. We arrived, I set up. The first speaker started speaking, who's a retired teacher who was concerned about trans in schools and how that affects children. But she was talking purely about children. She was not talking about adults who have protected characteristics, obviously. And then towards the end of her speech, I became aware of security guards standing behind me in the middle room. So I went to have a quick word with them and see what they wanted. And they said, we've had a complaint. And I said, what's the complaint? And they wouldn't say. Then they said, will you come and talk to the landlord? So I went to the front of the bar and they indicated this chap was the landlord, but he looked about 20, so I don't think he was the landlord. So I said, I hear you have a complaint about us. Can you tell me what it is? And he couldn't.
That sounds very Kafkaesque, as though you've committed a crime, but they can't tell you what the crime is.
Well, that's what I couldn't understand, because, you know, you might... Obviously, they can't tell you who the complainant is, but they should be able to tell you what the complaint is.
GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 23 minutes past 1 and we're going straight to some breaking news. A major incident has been declared at a care home in Swanage, where South Western Ambulance Service confirmed 2 people were taken to hospital and a hazard response team was deployed on Wednesday.
Now, a local councillor has claimed that 3 people at the scene have been confirmed dead. Yes, we understand 3 people have been found dead. 4 now have been taken to hospital after this incident at this care home in Swanage. That's according to the Dorset police. We know that the care home is in Olwell Road, Swanage. That's what the Dorset police spokesman has confirmed. And an investigation has been launched because their deaths are so far being treated as unexplained.
This is, of course, a major incident. It received a significant response from emergency services. We've seen pictures from the scene of dozens of vehicles and, of course, a complete evacuation of the care home. There were officials from a gas distribution company that were called to the care home earlier today as well. We'll have many more details for you shortly.
We will indeed. But we're going to move on because GB News can exclusively reveal that civil servants blocked a Rwanda-style deportation deal with Uganda.
Well, this is after concerns that were raised over the African nation's track record on LGBT rights. Let's speak to our national reporter, Charlie Peters, on this. You can fill us in with the details. Charlie, this was blocked due to human rights concerns.
That's right, Tom. That's as I understand it from the Whitehall sources. You've told me about this situation where 2 years ago, when the Rwanda plan was signed under Priti Patel's leadership at the Home Office, other nations suggested that they too could do the same deal with the United Kingdom, and one of the nations that came forward was Uganda. Now, as I understand it, discussions were held between the British government and the Ugandans at the embassy level. When I spoke to the Ugandan High Commission, they confirmed knowledge of this situation but didn't offer a comment on the record, but they did confirm that they were aware of this proposal. Now, according to the sources that I've spoken to, several who were aware of the matter at the time, even though this was processed and that meeting took place, Foreign Office officials in particular objected to this on grounds surrounding Uganda's homosexuality laws and their rules on same-sex couples and other LGBT rights issues. In particular, they were concerned about the possibility that Britain would have legally to deport people who arrive illegally to Uganda on the grounds of the ECHR or human rights legislation, which in many cases does prevent deportations where there is a fear of torture or a risk to someone's life on these legal grounds. Now, one of the sources I spoke to for this story told me that they believed this deal could still have been forced through if there was sufficient political will under Rishi Sunak's premiership, but they said that that just wasn't there. They didn't want to have the fight with their own civil servants to get this over the line, and so those objections that the Foreign Office officials threw up stopped it from going any further, and, well, Rwanda's now been scrapped, but Uganda didn't even get going.
That's very interesting to find out that they were talking, very much considering Uganda as an option. So we have another European country that's doing the same, and they've gone a bit further, have they, in their talks with Uganda? But apparently not good enough for us. And does this raise questions about the ECHR, how much of a block that actually is, or is it more about our own domestic political will?
Well, one of the sources I spoke to said that this incident showed how important it was to remove ourselves from European laws in order to achieve the deportations and the immigration system that we want. That if we were away from the ECHR, we wouldn't have to have these concerns about deportation on grounds of homosexuality or risk to life being blocked along those lines. Previous Home Secretary Suella Braverman said that this was often being overplayed by asylum seekers. But at the same time, as you've mentioned, Emily, the Dutch government is in talks to get this over the line. Their immigration minister described Uganda last week as a hospitable country. Another source told me that this situation does show that you can achieve things with countries without leaving the ECHR, and this was potentially, as they've said, an issue of political will.
Well, we've seen this now with the Dutch, the Netherlands government, new Netherlands government that is doing this sort of negotiation with Uganda. We've also seen the Italian government designate 19 safe countries whereby people can be automatically deported back to those countries or indeed processed in Albania too. I mean, how does this square with what we've been told repeatedly about the British adherence to the ECHR? Because both of these two countries are signatories to that convention, are members of that court. Are they just taking it less seriously than we do?
Well, the French paid a fine even as recently as a year ago after breaching the ECHR to deport a foreign terrorist. That was deemed to be a risk that the ECHR needs to cover. So even in that scenario, we've seen them act accordingly. We've also seen the Germans deporting Afghans back to Afghanistan without even doing a deal with the Taliban. That would also be a concern for the ECHR ruling. So clearly, Tom, there are many cases on the continent where countries can have this sort of achievement and these links with other countries, which appear to be not possible in this country. So it does raise questions for those who think that the way to achieve a stronger immigration system is you have to leave the ECHR.
Also, how many countries are there available to us that we could have such a scheme with if we look at all of these different records on human rights? I mean, I'm just reading here, as of May the 29th, 2023, more than half of Africa's 50 nations prohibit consensual same-sex activity. So, I mean, half of Africa is certainly off the cards. If you see what I mean, there are a limited number of nations that have a similar track record on human rights as we do in this country.
Precisely, Emily. I think that points to why the source who was closely familiar with this issue referred to the issue of political will to get this over the line. There are always going to be big objections to these sorts of deals from people in the civil service and human rights lawyers. It's about the ambition to get them done. That's their view.
And yet, Charlie, we know that when the government was explicit about wanting to break law, not human rights law, but international law in a limited and specific way, in the words of the former Justice Secretary, that caused the most enormous consternation in this country. As you've just listed there, I mean, Germany's run the risk of this, France has paid fines. Countries break international law consistently, all the time. But it seems in this country, we have a media furore whenever someone suggests that we might break international law in a limited or indeed specific way. Is that less about political will from Downing Street and more about our media and political culture. If we sign up to a rule, we are the kind of country that views ourselves as a stickler for that rule. We couldn't countenance having the sort of Southern European attitude to some of these rules, which, dare I say it, are far less likely to sort of go by every jot and tittle of them.
Jot and tittle?
You learn a new phrase every week from Tom Harwood, that's for sure. My responding to that, I mean, it was such a powerful rant. I don't know where to go with it, but I will.
Is
Tom,
that the case?
Are we too British about it?
Well, here we go. I think a lot of European nations, in this split that we've seen between Britain and our nearest neighbours, they seem to promote the national interest more keenly in their arguments for breaking these rules and regulations and legal treaties. Whereas, as you say, Tom, in the United Kingdom, there has been more of a process of staying along the line of the law in every circumstance. The French are paying fines and the Germans are going around bypassing rules on even dealing with the Taliban to deport to that country. Certainly not considered by many that I'm aware of as being a safe country, Afghanistan. Then clearly there is a gap between the political ambition in this country and perhaps on the continent. There was still some firm outrage against the French government and the German government when they conducted those deals. There will be many in the Netherlands who don't like the proposal with Uganda. But we can reveal today that we tried to do the same in Britain a couple years ago, and I wonder how many other countries had discussions at the embassy level beyond Rwanda and Uganda, and I think there will be a few more we could be able to hear about in the coming weeks. Well, I'll try and reveal them at least.
Yeah, you try and uncover those. It's very interesting to see what, civil servants have been tasked with and how these things don't necessarily come to light. Charlie Peters, our national reporter, thank you very much for that exclusive.
Well, this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News, and we're expecting a statement from the Home Secretary on the review into the accountability of firearms officers. This, of course, all following the murder of Chris Kaba. Or not indeed the murder, the legal killing, the lawful killing of Chris Kaba. Well, that's after your headlines with Sam Francis.
Very good afternoon to you from the newsroom, fast approaching 33 minutes past 1. Let's start this update with the latest developments in that breaking news we brought you in the last half hour or so. Dorset Police have released new information now on the situation, major incident, they say, in Swanage at a care home. Let's just bring in our Home and Security editor, Mark White, for more on this. Mark, what have we just heard from the Dorset Police Force?
Well, Dorset Police confirming that 3 people have died, 3 elderly residents in this care home, the Gainsborough care home in Swanage. That incident was...
Mark, we'll just take a pause there. I don't believe we've got your mic working at this stage. Let's just recap the details that we do have at this stage. Dorset Police, as Mark was saying there, you may have been able to hear him, have confirmed that 3 people have been found dead and 4 have, we understand, been taken to hospital after an incident at a care home in Swanage. I believe we might be able to bring Mark White back in the line in the studio. We're just waiting for confirmation on that. Social Services also indicating a possible link at that care home to a carbon monoxide leak, although at this stage the exact nature of the incident remains unclear. Authorities at this stage urging residents in the area to avoid the situation as it is developing. South Western Ambulance Service this morning responding at around 5:20 in the early hours. And I believe we can now bring Mark back in for more on that. Mark, take it away.
Yeah, apologies for that. Hopefully you can hear me now. So this confirmation...
Apologies for that. I believe we can't cross to Mark at this stage. What we'll do is we'll bring Mark back in as soon as we can for you, and apologies there. I think we do have pictures, though, from the scene that we might be able to show you if you're watching on television, just so you can see the situation where a vast number of police and ambulance crews are on the scene. It appears that they are now clearing some of the interior from that care home as they monitor the situation. We will keep across all the latest details for you and bring Mark White straight back with details as soon as we can. Turning, though, to some other breaking news today, we have heard that a third body has been recovered from the English Channel after a migrant boat sank. That's according to French Coast Guard in the area. That migrant boat sank off the coast of Calais earlier today. A passing ferry recovered the third victim after a body was spotted floating in the water. A fourth migrant, we understand, was also taken to hospital for treatment after being pulled from the water earlier this morning. That now means that 50 people or so have died so far this year in migrant crossings. Around 50 on that boat today, as it went down, were stranded in the water, though they have now been rescued. We're also hearing 2 other migrant boats are currently making the journey across the Channel. That's it from me for now. Apologies for that issue earlier with Mark's audio. We will fix that for you and get you the latest as soon as we can.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello, good morning and welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. A fairly foggy start across the south, though that's clearing through this morning, leaving a largely dry day with plenty of sunny spells. Cloudier in the northwest, though, with some rain, though that is generally easing. That's as a result of a weather front that's just moving into the far north of Scotland. But otherwise, we've got high pressure building across the country, leaving plenty of dry and bright weather conditions across the UK. Perhaps that sunshine fairly weak at times with a build-up of cloud, but otherwise largely dry. Just the chance of the odd shower across Wales and the Midlands later, though you'll be rather unlucky if you catch any of those. Different story across Scotland, though. Plenty of cloud here, some rain at drizzle at times, and plenty of blustery winds feeding into the far northwest. Now, as we head into the evening, those winds are going to continue to strengthen across Scotland, particularly those exposed coasts in the far northwest, with a risk of gales overnight. Still plenty of cloud across the country too, though any rain and drizzle generally easing. Quite a cloudy picture across Northern Ireland, northern parts of England, but otherwise across the south, plenty of clear skies to end the day. Now, where we see those clear skies overnight is going to turn rather chilly, though not turning quite as chilly as it did last night. Perhaps still some pockets of mist and fog, but once again, not quite as foggy as it was this morning. Across Scotland, though, those winds will continue to strengthen, a risk of gales overnight, and a chance we may just start to see some rain clip the Outer Hebrides. But otherwise, a largely dry night, and most towns and cities remaining in the high single figures, low double digits. Now, through the course of tomorrow, once again, plenty of blustery winds across Scotland with a risk of coastal gales, and we'll continue to see that cloud spill in from the northwest with some outbreaks of rain, particularly by the afternoon. Western parts of Northern Ireland and northwestern parts of Scotland seeing some heavy downpours by the time we reach the afternoon. Otherwise, mostly dry elsewhere and feeling pleasant where you catch the sunshine.
The latest GB News travel.
Hello, I'm John Vincent. The M2 westbound in Antrim. We're seeing queues there. There's a lane closed for an accident if you're heading between Junction 2 Greencastle towards Junction 4 for Sandy Knowes. The usual queues for the M61 southbound in Manchester at Junction 1, the Swinton interchange. Queues on the M1 southbound in Bedfordshire. Firstly, there's a lane closed for an earlier accident if you're heading between Junction 11A, the Dunstable Northern Bypass, and Junction 11 for Luton. There's also queues on surrounding routes. And further along the M1 southbound, we've got a lane closed for a broken down lorry in the roadworks area just after Junction 12 for Flitwick. And be aware if you're travelling westbound on the M2 in Kent, the exit slip road is closed for emergency bridge repairs at Junction 2 for Strood. And that's the latest traffic and travel news.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's coming up to 20 to 2. Now, the Home Secretary is reviving a review into firearms officer accountability following the acquittal of police marksman Martin Blake over the killing of Chris Kaba. This is the Home Secretary currently announcing this review live in the House of Commons.
Yes, so this, of course, relates to the Chris Kaba incident that Sergeant Martin Blake, who was named in the trial, he has been found to be not guilty of the murder of Chris Kaba. And now there's a lot of talk about how police who carry firearms should be held accountable in their roles and all of the, difficulties of the job and how they handle these types of claims, allegations.
Also, we know that many firearms officers in the Metropolitan Police, in the wake of this shooting, have actually handed back their firearms, handed them in, returning them to the Met because of the consternation that is involved when carrying out that sort of duty. Many police officers, particularly in the Metropolitan Police, simply do not want to have that professional risk of even lawfully carrying out a lawful shooting, still having all of that sort of community uproar, or indeed the sort of bounty. The bounty we now know is on that police officer's head.
Yes, I mean, it's worth noting that last year, Suella Braverman, when she was Home Secretary, she pledged to review the way that firearms officers are held accountable, those firearm officers who take fatal shots, like in this particular case. So the Home Secretary will be setting out her plans. Shall we speak to the former Police and Crime Commissioner, Festus Akinbusoye? Festus, thank you very much indeed for joining us on the show again. Very difficult for the Home Secretary, this one, any Home Secretary. This is a case, the Chris Kaba case, had huge amounts of media coverage, huge amounts of commentary around it. We now find out that Martin Blake, the sergeant in question, has been found not guilty of the murder of Chris Kaba. Huge question marks over how police officers should or should not be held accountable and how they can be, and also protecting those types of police officers in what is an extremely difficult job.
Well, absolutely. And what I will say to you is that in terms of accountability, if I can deal with that initially, in my view, and having been part of that accountability infrastructure and landscape in British policing, I can tell you that British policing is probably one of the most accountable in the world. You have the level of internal scrutiny. You've got the Police and Crime Commissioner level as well of their chiefs. We have the IOPC, of course. There's an element of accountability to HMI CFRS as well, and so on and so forth. So we do, and obviously you have local scrutiny panels that challenges the decision-making of police officers at the local level as well. But what I have to say is this. Firearms officers do an extremely difficult job, and it's no surprise that not many police officers are able to bear firearms. We do not have an armed police in Britain, and long may that continue. However, we do not treat the firearms officers, in my opinion, that we should treat them the same way as you would treat a civilian. And so I totally support the call by Sir Mark Rowley for the extra protection to be given to the firearms officers. And the mayor, who's the Police and Crime Commissioner in London, should absolutely be full square behind the Met Commissioner in calling on the Home Office to give this extra level of protection to firearms officers as well.
Festus, you mentioned just how accountable police services are in the United Kingdom. I wonder, and perhaps this is glib, but to what extent are they too accountable? Should Martin Blake's name have been made public so early on in this investigation?
Absolutely not, in my view. In my opinion, that should not have happened. Accountability is one thing. Identifying people who are doing that kind of a job, in my opinion, was wrong, because now this man has got a £10,000 bounty on his head, for doing his job. So he forever now will be looking over his shoulders. I don't think that's what we want police officers anywhere in this country to be doing at a time when policing is struggling to retain police officers, let alone recruit. So in my opinion, accountability is not being given a special treatment. It's about, yes, being challenged about decision-making, but when they do make a decision in accordance with the law and the training and the approved practice from the College of Policing, they don't get thrown under the bus, because what you do get then is police officers thinking, should I do my job the way that I've been trained, or should I just not do it because I just can't stand the hassle? And there are officers who are making that decision, and I have spoken to some of them as well, and that is just not a good place for any of us to be in.
No, absolutely not. And I wonder if you can comment on this. The BBC has come under a bit of fire this morning. They've been reporting that this not guilty verdict has left the black community in South London traumatised. Is the black community traumatised by this?
Well, if the black community, because there is no such thing as a monolithic community, whatever that means. But if the black community was traumatized by the killing of 2 black people at the Notting Hill Carnival, if they are traumatized by the other homicides that we have seen tragically in London, then I can understand why that same would apply in the case of Mr. Kaba. But look, what I will say is this: opinions are divided on this issue within individuals, black, white, or whatever the case might be. But what we do know is that there are some very dangerous people out there. I had a chance to deal with some of these people when I was a special constable. I got a chance to see more of this when I was a police and crime commissioner. And I can hand on heart say that every time that I made a decision as in police uniform, or when I spoke with police officers who made decisions when I was when I was a police and crime commissioner, not one of them made that decision on the grounds of the racial background of the person they were dealing with. They just wanted to do their job. So I do not necessarily buy this argument about the racial dimension of policing. I just don't think that is the case. And look, this is coming from somebody who has been stopped in search, who has been boxed in by a police car. And of course, I did nothing wrong. I will be very honest with you in saying that. But, you know, this report by the BBC about the black community being traumatized, I just want people to stop killing each other, period.
Well, Festus Akinbusoye, former police and crime commissioner, really appreciate your thoughts and your expertise on this issue. Thanks very much for joining us.
I mean, a lot of people, have made their thoughts. A lot of people from the black community, whatever that means, as Festus says there, it's a very diverse community. People are not all the same. I mean, people saying that, perpetuate stereotypes, that all black people are some homogenous group who will all feel the exact same way about a verdict trial like this, and that, no, the community is not traumatised. It's very interesting who certain broadcasters want to, show. But anyway, this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Up next, taxi drivers have been told to take English lessons even if they're native speakers who have lived in the country all their lives. Why on earth would they bring in such a regulation? Which council is this?
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
It seems that the younger generation's interest in literature is waning. Academics argue that educational policies have failed to encourage reading for pleasure, contributing to declining numbers of English literature students and a shift towards young adult books rather than classic novels. According to 2023 figures from the National Literacy Trust, the number of 8 to 18-year-olds who say they enjoy reading has sunk to its lowest level for almost 20 years, with a quarter fewer reading each day over that same time period. To share more with us about this topic, I'm joined now by the journalist Charlotte Lytton. Charlotte, welcome back. Lovely to talk to you again. Tell us your perspective on this issue. What is happening?
Well, speaking to academics, we can't deny, it seems, that there is a big problem here, and it starts right at school. As you read there, young children simply don't enjoy reading for pleasure as they did before. We can't deny that is also a massive part because of smartphones, because kids now are faced with all of these things vying for their attention. They just don't have to sit down and entertain themselves with a long book and nothing else as they did before. As we see from those figures with people going to study humanities at university, the decline is just going all the way because people simply are not interested in reading for pleasure as they were.
Do you get any feeling that education policy or that teachers are taking steps to counter this?
Well, there is a review of the curriculum going ahead right now, but school is a huge part of it. One of the things that has come up in this conversation is whether teachers now are dealing with crowd control, which means they can't simply encourage reading for pleasure because they're simply trying to get a hold of the students they have.
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's just gone 10 to 2. Now, a council in Lincolnshire is facing backlash after introducing mandatory English language assessments for taxi drivers, even if they're native speakers of English.
Oh, that would annoy me. It originally applied only to new drivers, which you can understand, but now existing drivers will also have to take the test at a cost of £46.50 unless they can find some qualifications from when they took tests in English. Anyway, let's get more with the director of the National Private Hire and Taxi Association, David Laurie. David, this would enrage me if I'd been a taxi driver for years and years and years and I was a native English speaker.
Absolutely, it would enrage me too. And let's be honest, half of the time we're calling local authorities, we're speaking to them on the phone. Surely that's enough to assess that you can understand them and they can understand you. Why are people being asked to pay a fee simply to prove that they have the command of the English language in order to ask to pay the fee and read out the numbers and understand what you're saying to them? And to adopt it and expand it into all existing fees, all that's doing is adding money, taking more money out of the drivers' pockets and realistically funding the council because you're not going to gain anything from it. Nothing's going to change. You can either speak English or you can't.
Well, or quite probably what could happen is a counterproductive effect. When similar rules were introduced in London, I mean, last year, I should say, at the start of this year, in January this year, the mayor undid these rules in London because when they were introduced, the proportion of minicab drivers, Uber drivers, cab drivers that could speak English went down, not up, because the only people who have qualifications in speaking English aren't native English speakers. So it's a rule that was introduced to try and make people speak more English actually ended up with a smaller proportion of taxi drivers speaking competent English. I mean, why do you think Lincolnshire has fallen into exactly the same problem that London found?
Well, in all honesty, it actually goes a little bit further than that because it isn't just the English language test. The DFT in their best practice guidance in November also recommended that drivers undergo exactly the same safeguarding course every 3 years, despite the fact that it hasn't changed. And they're a lot more expensive. And when you introduce it for renewals, what are you achieving? For a first-time applicant, okay, you can understand the logic, you can understand the safeguard, and you can understand the public safety aspect of it. But to repeat the same course every single 3 years...
Oh, my goodness, it's so costly and wastes so much time. David, we're going to have to leave it there, sorry, but we've run out of time, but great to get you on. David Laurie, Director of the National Private Hire and Taxi Association.
Now, we have to say that the South Keviston District Council said from 2021 this test was introduced only for new drivers. Subsequently, in May 2024, the interests of equality, safety, the council agreed to apply it to all drivers. So that is from South Keviston District Council.
Oh, goodness me. Council's just always getting in the way. Anyway, we've got lots more coming up, so don't go anywhere. Stick with us.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good morning and welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. A fairly foggy start across the south, though that's clearing through this morning, leaving a largely dry day with plenty of sunny spells. Cloudier in the northwest, though, with some rain, though that is generally easing. That's as a result of a weather front that's just moving into the far north of Scotland. But otherwise, we've got high pressure building across the country, leaving plenty of dry and bright weather conditions across the UK. Perhaps that sunshine fairly weak at times with a build-up of cloud, but otherwise largely dry. Just the chance of the odd shower across Wales and the Midlands later, though you'll be rather unlucky if you catch any of those. Different story across Scotland, though. Plenty of cloud here, some rain at drizzle at times, and plenty of blustery winds feeding into the far northwest. Now, as we head into the evening, those winds are going to continue to strengthen across Scotland, particularly those exposed coasts in the far northwest, with a risk of gales overnight. Still plenty of cloud across the country too, though any rain and drizzle generally easing. Quite a cloudy picture across Northern Ireland, northern parts of England, but otherwise across the south, plenty of clear skies to end the day. Now, where we see those clear skies overnight is going to turn rather chilly, though not turning quite as chilly as it did last night. Perhaps still some pockets of mist and fog, but once again not quite as foggy as it was this morning. Across Scotland, though, those winds will continue to strengthen, a risk of gales overnight and a chance we may just start to see some rain clip the Outer Hebrides. But otherwise, a largely dry night and most towns and cities remaining in the high single figures, low double digits. Now, through the course of tomorrow, once again, plenty of blustery winds across Scotland with a risk of coastal gales, and we'll continue to see that cloud spill in from the northwest with some outbreaks of rain, particularly by the afternoon. Western parts of Northern Ireland and northwestern parts of Scotland seeing some heavy downpours by the time we reach the afternoon. Otherwise, mostly dry elsewhere and feeling pleasant where you catch the sunshine.
We can expect clear skies, leading to a light and warm day ahead. Lovely. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
This is the final week to grab your chance to win £36,000 cash in the Great British Giveaway, and you really could be next.
Hi, I'm Angela from Wigan and I won £30,000. Winning the money enabled me to treat my children, which I've not been able to do for a while. And if I can win, anyone can win.
For another chance to win £36,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2, or post your name and number to GB08 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close 5 p.m. this Friday. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about?
Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe. Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 2 o'clock on Wednesday, the 23rd of October. I'm Tom Harwood.
And I'm Emily Carver.
A major incident at a care home in Dorset where 3 people have been found dead and 4 taken to hospital. We'll have all the details with our Home and Security editor.
And in other news, Trump rages at Labour. The Trump campaign accuses the far-left Labour Party of interfering in the US election. But Keir Starmer insists he still has a good relationship with Donald Trump, despite the former president filing an extraordinary legal complaint against the British governing party.
It all comes as Lord Ali, the very generous Labour donor, has been forced to apologise after he was found to have breached House of Lords rules on 4 separate occasions. How will Keir Starmer react? And in the last half hour, the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, has unveiled what she is calling a presumption of anonymity for firearms officers subject to criminal trial. This, of course, in the wake of what happened to firearms officer Martin Blake being named, his name being ridden through the press, protested against, only then to be found innocent.
Yes, and reports that he and his family have been in hiding, reports that there's a £10,000 bounty on his head as a result of his name going so public. Now, Yvette Cooper, she said, when officers act in the most dangerous situations on behalf of the state, it's vital that they and their families are not put in further danger during any subsequent legal proceedings. So we'll introduce a presumption of anonymity for firearms officers subject to criminal trial. This is very interesting. This sounds like a sensible step, considering everything we've seen with this recent example of a fatal shooting.
Yeah.
Very, very sensible, I would say.
You'd have to have a heart of stone. You'd have to live in a completely parallel world to see what has gone on with the case of Martin Blake to not be an outrageous ordeal for this officer who did exactly the right thing, has been found under our legal system to have done the right thing, to have done his job, and now is in hiding with a £10,000 bounty on his head. I mean, it's the most extraordinary, egregious outrage.
And it's that juxtaposition, isn't it, between Sergeant Martin Blake's name being out there from pretty much the start to of course Chris Kaba, who was protected, at least in his criminal history and association. So get your views in on that. Do you think that's a positive step, that there's a presumption of anonymity? At gbnews.com/your say. But let's get the headlines with Sam Francis.
Very good afternoon to you. It is just after 2 o'clock. We'll return to the top story from Dorset in just a moment, but I want to bring you a breaking line we're hearing from Birmingham Airport. We understand that the Birmingham Airport has been evacuated this afternoon, passengers being advised not to attend due to, as we understand at this stage, a police incident. In a statement on social media, the airport has said that the West Midlands Police are currently on site dealing with an incident. Airport operations are all currently suspended. And as I say, passengers being advised not to attend the airport at this time. They are encouraging any passengers and people in the area to check social media channels to be updated as and when that situation changes. We will keep across that for you here in the newsroom. Any more developments we'll bring straight to you. Next, though, we will return to that story from Dorset, where an investigation has been launched today into the unexplained deaths of 3 people at a care home in Swanage. Social services indicated a possible link to a carbon monoxide leak, although the exact nature of the incident at this stage remains unclear. South Western Ambulance Service responded in the early hours of this morning, dispatching a hazard response team and 10 double-crewed ambulances. Authorities are urging the public to avoid the area as that situation develops. Plenty more on that with our Home and Security editor, Mark White, later this hour. Turning to the House of Commons now, and Angela Rayner has been filling in for Sir Keir Starmer there at Prime Minister's questions this afternoon. The Deputy Prime Minister came under pressure for more action against what Labour MP Mike Tapp called the evil smuggling gangs after the deadly sinking of a migrant boat in the English Channel this morning. Here's what Angela Rayner had to say in response.
Our people, women, children. We are putting in place a credible plan to protect our borders and remove those with no right to be here by setting up our Border Security Command, backed by £75 million of investment, and we're working with our international partners to target and disrupt the criminal smuggling gangs.
Angela Rayner there speaking earlier. Well, a third body has been recovered from the English Channel after a migrant boat sank there earlier this morning. That is according to the French Coast Guard. Some 50 people were on board that boat as it went down earlier today. It now means that the total death toll in the English Channel so far this year has surpassed 50 people. We also heard earlier that 2 other migrant boats were making that journey across the Channel. Rescue services are remaining on high alert and closely monitoring the situation, but there is no word yet on the condition of those on board the other vessels making the crossing. Labour peer Lord Ali is facing fresh criticism after a report has revealed 4 minor breaches in the registration of his interests. The House of Lords Commissioner for Standards found that he failed to register himself as an unremunerated director of a foundation and neglected to maintain accurate records for a company he controlled. However, the Commissioner deemed them minor, requiring only a letter of apology, which Lord Ali has now provided. In that letter, he acknowledged the breaches and said he regrets the oversight. 2 survivors of the Manchester Arena bombing have won their High Court harassment case against a former TV producer who claims the attack was staged. Martin Hibbert and his daughter Eve, who suffered life-changing injuries, sued Richard Hall after he published videos and a book alleging the bombing was a hoax. Mr. Hall claimed his actions, including filming Eve outside her home, were in the public interest as a journalist, and he said that millions of people have bought a lie about the attack. However, the court has ruled in their favour, dismissing Hall's claims as unfounded. Sir Keir Starmer insists his relationship with Donald Trump is intact, despite claims that Labour interfered in the US election. Trump's campaign filed a complaint accusing Labour of illegally supporting Kamala Harris, citing meetings between senior Labour officials and her team. Starmer dismissed the claims, stating that Labour members are in the US voluntarily, as they've done in previous elections. He emphasised his personal rapport with Trump, recalling their meeting in New York, and said he'll work with whoever becomes the next US president. The complaint, though, remains under review by the US federal election officials in the United States. And we'll just return quickly to that breaking news I brought you at the top of the update from Birmingham Airport, where passengers are being advised not to attend due to a police incident. We've also heard that a suspicious vehicle may be involved in that incident. All airport operations at this stage currently suspended. And as I say, passengers advised not to come to the airport this afternoon. Any more details we will, of course, bring to you as we get them. That's it from me for now. I'll be back with you in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 8 minutes past 2, and to deliver more on that breaking news, passengers are being advised not to attend Birmingham Airport due to a police incident.
Yes, GB News Home and Security editor Mark White has the latest for us. Now, Mark, what do we know at this stage?
Well, we know that it is a security issue, a concern around a vehicle, suspicious vehicle that's been parked outside the terminal building. And that's resulted in often an abundance of caution. The police because airports are high-risk environments in terms of the potential for anyone that might want to do harm to that building or people inside it. So the police have evacuated that terminal building. So Birmingham Airport effectively now closed down in terms of its operations. So you can imagine there will be massive disruption to passengers going to the airport, and indeed those landing in and trying to exit the airport, until the police, the security services at the airport can determine that the vehicle that is currently causing them such concern is innocuous. We don't know. It could be just someone foolishly decided to park it outside to go in and collect someone. If they've done that, they'll be in for one hell of a ticking off. But at the moment, there is very significant disruption to this busy airport in the West Midlands, with the terminal building closed down, with passengers evacuated and staff evacuated from the building while the emergency services investigate and deal with this.
It's hard to underestimate the scale of the disruption for such a busy airport, for such a sort of pivotal regional airport there in Birmingham. The whole terminal staff and indeed passengers turfed out, and now passengers who were expecting to get a plane later today told do not come.
Yeah, we've had a statement from Birmingham Airport that's just come through. They say that West Midlands Police are currently dealing with an ongoing incident on site. Airport operations are currently impacted, and passengers should not come to the airport at this time. So the warning that passengers should stay away from the airport, even if they, have a flight that's scheduled for a couple of hours' time. For the moment, they're just being told not to turn up at the airport. So even if, in the fullness of time, this is found to be something that is not a threat to the airport, it will have very significant impact to the airports and the airport's operations going forward, because it's not just those at the moment whose flights are either arriving and people trying to disembark to get through the airport, and those that want to get away, but it's those future flights about to land or to take off that will be impacted. So we can expect very significant disruption to the smooth flowing operations at this terminal for the rest of the day. We'll have a knock-on effect. There'll be flights cancelled, very angry passengers, obviously, but that's just what happens in the current operational environment, where we have a significant terrorist threat in this country. We see it in central London often, where there is a suspicious vehicle and you get whole streets that are cordoned off for a significant amount of time while the police and security services deal with that to determine whether it's a threat or not. But when it impacts something like a highly complex operating environment like an airport, then it's much more impactful in terms of the knock-on effects. It won't just be when they declare this safe, if they do, that the vehicle is safe and they can continue operations at the airport. There will be all of the catching up that needs to be done, the diverted aircraft, the passengers queuing up that will need to get on to delayed flights, and as I say, some services that will be cancelled.
But as it stands, we don't know why this particular vehicle was deemed suspicious by the authorities. No ideas on that.
Just a vehicle parked up outside the terminal in an area where it shouldn't be and left abandoned is enough to, instigate a good deal of sort of concern and alarm amongst the police at an airport. There are armed police officers, security patrols around airports, especially busy airports, all of the while, because they are potential targets for terrorism. So they take no chances. It might be at the end of the day that this is as simple as someone who's just decided to park there and shouldn't park there. In which case, it is ridiculous. People should know that there are firm reasons why you've got to go to the short-term car park if you're going to sort of pick someone up or drop someone off, other than if you're a sort of taxi outside the front of an airport building. You just can't do that for fear of sparking this kind of threat. But as I say, we don't know enough about it. We just know that the real-world consequences of this suspicious vehicle is very significant disruption to the airport.
And indeed, it reminds us all that we are living in that heightened environment of terror threat. But elsewhere, Mark, there's been this major incident at a care home in Dorset. 3 people have been found dead and 4 now taken to hospital.
Yeah, an absolutely awful incident that unfolded. South West Ambulance Service were called into the Gainsborough retirement home at about 5:20 this morning to reports of elderly residents there who were unresponsive. So the ambulance service attended. They say that they sent 10 emergency vehicles as well as a hazardous response unit as well. Then after a while they required a full emergency response, so the fire brigade, the police were all called in as well, and they've confirmed that 3 residents in that elderly care home have subsequently died. Another 4 residents have been taken to hospital for treatment. And then the other residents are 48 residents in this care home, very elderly residents, some of them suffering from dementia, other infirmities. They were evacuated initially to a local church hall in the area around Swanage, just around this Gainsborough retirement home. And now they are being moved on to other facilities in the area, because even though the initial incident is being dealt with, it will be a while. This is a crime scene, effectively, and it will be a while before that home is able to receive residents back in again. Now, in terms of the potential cause, nothing from the emergency services at this time, from the police. It's just being treated, they say, as unexplained in terms of the deaths. However, a local councillor in the area has said that the working theory is that it may have been a carbon monoxide leak that resulted in the deaths of these elderly residents.
How awful. How awful. Well, thank you very much indeed, Mark, for bringing us both of those stories, Birmingham Airport and this care home. 3 dead.
You'd think that care homes would have, by law, up-to-date working carbon monoxide alarms.
Well, that's just a working theory at the moment.
Yeah, no, we can't jump upon that. But, I mean, serious questions, whatever the cause of this, serious questions.
Yeah, there will be, I imagine. Thank you very much, Mark. In other news, earlier we brought you some news that Labour peer Lord Ali has been forced to apologise after breaking the House of Lords Code of Conduct.
Well, the peer was found to have committed 4 minor breaches in the Register of Interests. Indeed, he has breached the Code of Conduct and been forced to apologise for those 4 breaches. Let's get the very latest with our political correspondent, Olivia Utley.
Hello, yes. Lord Ali has been forced to apologise to the Committee for Peers' Conduct. Now, each of the 4 breaches in themselves were deemed to be minor by the chair of the committee. It was things like he had correctly registered that he was a trustee of the Charlie Peterson Foundation, but hadn't said that he was a unremunerated director of that foundation as well. None of these breaches on their own is that important, but the chair of the committee ruled that because there were 4 of them, he should apologise to the committee. Lord Ali has now made that written apology and the matter is, to all intents and purposes, closed. That said, Keir Starmer is having a pretty awkward time already, and the last thing he needs is Lord Ali's name to be back in the headlines again after all the controversy of the last few months. Obviously, Starmer's not having the best day. He's been on the plane all day to Chogum in Samoa, and at the moment he is dealing with these reports from Donald Trump. Donald Trump has reported the Labour Party to an official body because he says that Labour Party activists are interfering in the American election. Now, it's not yet clear whether Donald Trump and his team have an argument here. On the one hand, Keir Starmer and Angela Rayner have said that that activists are allowed to campaign in their own time using their own money, and that is fair enough. That does seem to follow the rules. But if any of those activists paid over $1,000 for plane tickets to America and back, that would count as a donation to the general election campaign. And given that plane tickets to America are so high at the moment, it wouldn't be surprising if at least a few of those 100 or so activists had paid more than $1,000. The other issue at play is the seniority of some of the Labour leaders who were coordinating this group of activists flying over to America. Sophia Patel is the head of operations for Labour, and she was posting on LinkedIn a post that's now been deleted, asking activists to get involved in this campaign in the US. Now, that could be seen as interference from the Labour Party itself into the American election. We'll have to wait and see. At the moment, it does look a little bit as though that relationship between Keir Starmer and Donald Trump, who of course could be the president in just a couple of weeks' time, is looking very frayed, which is tricky for Keir Starmer, given that he's spent the last 6 months or so very, very carefully avoiding direct criticism of Donald Trump for that very reason.
Thank you very much indeed, Olivia Rutley, our political correspondent. There outside the Houses of Parliament. Of course, it all adds to the perception of the current cabinet having a lot to say about Donald Trump in the past. I mean, there's a little list that's been put together by the people of Guido Fawkes magazine, starting with Ed Miliband calling Trump a racist and a misogynist in 2016. Wes Streeting writing a Guardian article titled "Labour must not allow Trump's ugly populism to blight the UK." Lammy, of course, calling Trump a neo-Nazi sympathising sociopath. Yeah, there's special relationship.
Don't worry, Emily. Keir Starmer said everything's fine.
Everything's fine. Good
Of
relationship.
course, we can always trust a politician's verdict on that.
2021, Lammy said, "Good riddance, Donald. The world is relieved to see the back of you." Oh dear, if he wins. Smoothing over. It can all be smoothed over.
I genuinely, for the sake of the country, I really hope it can be smoothed over. A million Brits every day work in American companies. A million Americans work in British companies every day. This economic relationship, it's our single largest trading partner of any one country. I mean, this is such an important relationship. And to weaken it, to threaten it, I worry for the country.
Yes, anyway, this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Up next, Home Secretary Yvette Cooper has unveiled a presumption of anonymity for firearms officers subject to criminal trial. This is very interesting indeed. A positive development, perhaps. That's next.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Right, up and down the country, many parents are preparing or have indeed already sent their child off to university.
Indeed, but sometimes it can leave parents struggling to cope with the, quote, empty nest syndrome their child leaves behind. So joining us now to discuss how to cope with sending off your sprogs to university, or not so sprogs, is broadcaster and psychotherapist Lucy Beresford. Good morning, Lucy. Nice to see you this early. This is a real thing, isn't it? It's our colleague Paul Coitz, our sports expert, describes it as grief, sending your young adults off to uni and leaving the nest for the first time.
Yes, I think grief is the right word because it's an ending. And it's not just an ending with your relationship with your child. It changes from here on in. But it also is very much about your identity. Your identity as a parent is weakening. You'll always be that child's parent, but you're not going to have the same involvement on a daily basis. And so you're left to think, OK, well, what does my life look like going forward? What's my relationship? If you're in a relationship with a partner, how is that going to change? And like all elements of grief, there's going to be a bit of a process. There's going to be that transition period where you adjust to your new life, just as your sprogs, as you call them, are adjusting to their new, exciting phase of their life.
GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
So it's 2:24. This is Good Afternoon Britain with me, Emily and Tom. Now, just to remind you of the breaking news that passengers are being advised not to attend Birmingham Airport. This is due to a police incident.
Well, in a statement, West Midlands Police have said they're currently dealing with an ongoing incident on site. Airport operations are currently impacted and passengers should not come to the airport at this time.
Yes, we understand there was a suspicious vehicle involved, so at this time, flights appear to be grounded and people are being advised not to turn up at the airport. We'll bring you any more developments as and when we get them.
In other news now, the Home Secretary has revived a review into firearms officer accountability following the acquittal of police marksman Martin Blake for the killing of Chris Kaba.
Yes, she said the current system for holding police officers to account is not commanding the confidence of either the public or the police, and she announced the introduction of anonymity for officers subject to criminal trial.
When officers act in the most dangerous situations on behalf of the state, it is vital that those officers and their families are not put in further danger during any subsequent legal proceedings. So we will therefore introduce a presumption of anonymity for firearms officers subject to criminal trial following a police shooting in the course of their professional duties up to the point of conviction.
Well, to bring us more on this announcement and what it means on this presumption of anonymity, what that means for officers, GB News national reporter Charlie Peters is with us in the studio. Charlie, a big announcement.
Yes, well, Martin Blake was named in March of this year. And I think it's important to remind our viewers what sort of process took place for that to occur. He was previously known as the cipher November X-ray 121 after the investigation was launched into the fatal shooting of Chris Kaba in September 2022. And during the pre-trial hearings where both sides went through the legal arguments of what should be done in the information surrounding the case, the judge in that scenario at the Old Bailey heard that there was a significant risk to Martin Blake's life. A Met officer in the court said that in over 30 years of experience, he was not aware of a more dangerous scenario and he was not more concerned of the welfare of an officer before in his career. It was also said at that time that Chris Kaba's criminal past was quite extensive. They referred to the 6-7 gang and his links to that organisation, that he was a core member. But despite all of that, Martin Blake was named, and there has been a lot of criticism over that decision and the risk it put to Martin Blake and indeed his family. I've heard a lot of that over the last couple of days, as we all have. So that's the change that's going to be implemented in this scenario. So that sort of situation can't happen again. Demands for all the information to be released at that stage when the information and the proceedings haven't taken place and there's not been anything close to a conviction. But there was also an announcement from Yvette Cooper during that statement to the House earlier today, the Home Secretary talking about how the complexity and the delays to these reviews into violent incidents had affected the confidence from both complainants and the police. I think we have a clip we can play for you now.
So today I want to update the House. The Accountability Review found that the current system for holding police officers to account is not commanding the confidence of either the public or the police. Accountability and misconduct proceedings are too often plagued by delays stretching for years, which are damaging for complainants, officers and forces alike. And the system has become much more complex, with confusion over multiple thresholds for different investigations, a lack of clarity, especially involving specialist capabilities.
Well, that was the Home Secretary speaking a little bit earlier. But, Charlie, the Shadow Home Secretary, James Cleverly, has welcomed this review, indeed emphasised that it started really under the previous government.
Right, and there will be more changes announced as well as part of this move. Yvette Cooper wants to align the decisions made for charging between the IOPC and the CPS, because as it stands currently, the burden of proof or the requirement to bring charges for a police officer in these sorts of scenarios is lower, and that's no longer justified. That was the view of Yvette Cooper speaking in the House earlier. But she's also going to change the scenario so that the IOPC, the Independent Office of Police Conduct, is allowed to send evidence to the CPS where there is sufficient means to do so. So further changes there as part of this review. And there will also be, as she said, reforms to strengthen police vetting and misconduct, which will put vetting standards on a legislative footing, which will change that process as well. So the ongoing discussion about this scenario, the charging, the anonymity, still goes on days on.
I wonder how much of an admission this is that really, in the case of Martin Blake and the sort of 2-year ordeal that this innocent officer has been through, how much of an admission is this review from the Home Secretary that the wrong decisions were made over that case?
Well, Yvette Cooper, it's clear, I think, is playing a bit of a balancing act here, where, and I think many politicians are doing the same as well, they're trying to both deal with the outrage at the decision to charge Martin Blake and go through that trial, considering it was just a 3-hour verdict from the jury. That's all the time they spent reflecting on the 3 weeks of evidence that they were shown, but also wanting to, I wouldn't say appease, but express concern to the outrage and anger felt from some communities, particularly Black Britons, in reaction to that incident. Now, it should also be stressed that the IOPC and the CPS have defended the decision to bring murder charges against Blake, even since the verdict that came through on Monday evening. They said the case was carefully considered and it met the threshold. But as we've just heard from Yvette Cooper, that threshold for police officers in these scenarios will now be raised to align with their training and what's expected in these sorts of scenarios, so that all the evidence is more balanced and taken into greater consideration before those charging decisions are made.
Yes, as you say, this is a balancing act for the Home Secretary to get right. There needs to be accountability when it comes to how our police forces behave, particularly armed officers, but also they need to have the confidence that they can go about their job and be supported in it. Charlie Peters, thank you very much, our national reporter there.
Well, much more to come here on Good Afternoon Britain, including 2 ongoing incidents. One in Dorset, where 3 people have now been found dead in a care home, and in Birmingham. The airport has now been evacuated as police deal with an ongoing incident on site. Before we get on to all of that, let's get a news roundup with Sam.
Tom, Emily, thank you very much. It's 32 minutes past 2. As we just heard there, Birmingham Airport has been evacuated. All flights are also suspended following reports of a suspicious vehicle this afternoon. On a social media post, the airport has said that police are still currently on site dealing with that incident. No further details, though, at this stage. They say all airport operations are currently suspended, and a spokesman for West Midlands Police has said that passengers are advised not to come to the airport at this time. We will keep across that for you, bring you any more details as that story develops. In other news, an investigation has been launched into 3 unexplained deaths at a care home in Swanage where 48 elderly residents were living. Social services indicated a possible link to a carbon monoxide leak, although the exact nature of the incident remains unclear. South Western Ambulance Service responded in the early hours of this morning, dispatching a hazard response team and 10 double-crewed ambulances. Authorities are urging the public to avoid the area. The Deputy Prime Minister has come under pressure for more action against what Labour MP Mike Tapp called evil smuggling gangs after the sinking of a migrant boat this morning. Filling in for Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister's questions earlier, Angela Rayner insisted the government is establishing a credible plan to protect UK borders with, she said, millions of pounds of investment to combat people smuggling.
Our people, women, children. We are putting in place a credible plan to protect our borders and remove those with no right to be here by setting up our Border Security Command, backed by £75 million of investment, and we're working with our international partners to target and disrupt the criminal smuggling gangs.
And before I go, a third body has been recovered from the English Channel after a migrant boat sank, according to the French Coast Guard. A passing ferry recovered the third victim after a body was spotted floating in the water. A fourth migrant was taken to hospital for treatment after being pulled from the water earlier this morning. Around 50 people were on board when that vessel went down, leaving many stranded in the water. That's it from me for today. Sophia Wensler will have your next update at 3 o'clock, and Tom and Emily will be back straight after this short break.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello, good morning and welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. A fairly foggy start across the south, though that's clearing through this morning, leaving a largely dry day with plenty of sunny spells. Cloudier in the northwest, though, with some rain, though that is generally easing. That's as a result of a weather front that's just moving into the far north of Scotland. But otherwise, we've got high pressure building across the country, leaving plenty of dry and bright weather conditions across the UK. Perhaps that sunshine fairly weak at times with a build-up of cloud, but otherwise largely dry. Just the chance of the odd shower across Wales and the Midlands later, though you'll be rather unlucky if you catch any of those. Different story across Scotland, though. Plenty of cloud here, some rain at drizzle at times, and plenty of blustery winds feeding into the far northwest. Now, as we head into the evening, those winds are going to continue to strengthen across Scotland, particularly those exposed coasts in the far northwest, with a risk of gales overnight. Still plenty of cloud across the country too, though any rain and drizzle generally easing. Quite a cloudy picture across Northern Ireland, northern parts of England, but otherwise across the south, plenty of clear skies to end the day. Now, where we see those clear skies overnight is going to turn rather chilly, though not turning quite as chilly as it did last night. Perhaps still some pockets of mist and fog, but once again, not quite as foggy as it was this morning. Across Scotland, though, those winds will continue to strengthen, a risk of gales overnight, and a chance we may just start to see some rain clip the Outer Hebrides. But otherwise, a largely dry night, and most towns and cities remaining in the high single figures, low double digits. Now, through the course of tomorrow, once again, plenty of blustery winds across Scotland with a risk of coastal gales, and we'll continue to see that cloud spill in from the northwest with some outbreaks of rain, particularly by the afternoon. Western parts of Northern Ireland and northwestern parts of Scotland seeing some heavy downpours by the time we reach the afternoon. Otherwise, mostly dry elsewhere and feeling pleasant where you catch the sunshine.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm John Vincent. Queues on the M62 eastbound in West Yorkshire. It's partially blocked for an accident just after junction 22 Rishworth Moor. Queues going back towards junction 21 Milnrow, and there's also slow traffic on the opposite carriageway due to onlookers. Congestion on the M6 southbound in Cheshire. It's all due to an accident between junction 21 Woolston heading towards junction 20, the Lim interchange. Still got queues on the M1 southbound in Bedfordshire. It's as a result of a lane closure for emergency resurfacing repairs following an earlier accident between junction 11A, the Dunstable Northern Bypass, and 11 for Luton. Queues on the M1 southbound in Northamptonshire. It's all due to an accident between junction 17 for the M45 heading towards junction 16 for Daventry in the roadworks area. And that's the latest traffic and travel news.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
OK, welcome back to Good Afternoon Britain. Passengers are being advised not to attend Birmingham Airport due to a police incident. And our Home and Security Editor, Mark White, joins us now to bring us the very latest on this. As we understand, everyone's been told to stay away.
Yeah, this is still an ongoing security incident at the airport, and it's causing massive disruption to the airport because effectively all operations there have ceased. So incoming flights that were coming in. People on the ground are probably being held airside for the time being. Other flights would be diverted away from the airport. And then all these flights that were due to leave can't go anywhere because the passengers can't board because they're outside the terminal, taken away to a safe area, while the police deal with what we're told is a suspicious vehicle outside the terminal building. And that one incident, that suspicious vehicle, has resulted in this absolute chaos at this busy West Midlands airport.
Huge disruption, hard to overstate the amount of disruption this will be. A really significant sort of regional hub airport here. Do we have any indication for how long this might go on?
It will go on until the police can get a proper examination of the vehicle. Now, that might involve, depending on how concerned they are about the vehicle itself, on sometimes having to get robotic devices, tractored devices that go in there, these unmanned bomb disposal units that go in to take a proper look in the boots of the vehicle to make sure, or in the back seats or whatever, to make sure that there is nothing at risk on the vehicle. So it might take some time for that to happen. We don't know. We'd only be speculating. But regardless of the time it will take to deal with the initial incident of the suspicious vehicle, the knock-on effect is going to be very significant for the rest of the day, without a doubt, and maybe into tomorrow, because you've got flights where people that were probably jetting off on holiday or wherever they were going on business that were due to go, that are not going now, that may be delayed for a few hours or maybe cancelled altogether. If they're cancelled altogether, then people need to rearrange, try and go on later flights. They get full, they get knocked on. It just causes absolute chaos for ages. And the airlines, of course, as well, for those flights that have been diverted to other airports, incoming flights, they then have to make arrangements to get these people. And then that also has a knock-on effect for the aircraft that were supposed to be in one place, Birmingham Airport, now in somewhere like Manchester or wherever, that they then need to get back into the normal schedule. So it causes absolute chaos right across the system and wider ramifications than just the one airport in Birmingham.
And this comes in the context of a heightened terror threat in this country. Presumably, I don't know how many people would be in Birmingham Airport on a Wednesday afternoon,
Thousands.
but presumably thousands. Quite difficult to keep that amount of people calm. There may be some fears, then the communication might be lacking there. It takes quite a lot to evacuate so many people.
Yeah, I mean, we should say with regard to the terror threat, it sits at substantial at the moment, which is the median point on this 5-scale terror threat level. So the highest it's ever been is critical, meaning an attack is underway or about to be launched. Severe it was at for a significant amount of time. It's now been reduced to substantial.
Mark, I should say we're now looking at live pictures outside Birmingham Airport, where you can see stranded passengers standing by the curbside, on the curb by the road, with their bags, really at a loss with what to do.
Yeah, and it's a tried and tested procedure. Obviously, there are areas where the passengers would be taken to in the event of an emergency within the terminal building or outside the terminal building. So they're there in the queue and they're just hanging about and no doubt extremely anxious if they've got an upcoming flight. But there's very little they can do about it. It is really now in the hands of the emergency services, in the police in particular, and bomb disposal units to check out that vehicle to make sure that it's not a threat. And then once that has been declared safe, then the people will be getting back in the building. But clearly, looking at those live images from Birmingham Airport right now, we can see that it's not over. The people are still queuing outside. So the terminal building has not yet been declared safe.
Well, it looks like they're on the move. Yes, it looks like they're on the move somewhere.
Well, as I speak.
But I mean, people will have been, you know, partially through security. Yeah. They may well have been by the gate. They may have been on the tarmac waiting to actually board a flight. All of those people at all different stages of the Birmingham Airport experience will have been forced to evacuate.
Well, listen, this is very good news if people are now getting back into the terminal building. But as we've been saying, there are going to be significant issues in terms of actually the ramifications and the knock-on effects going forward, because there will be flights that were due to have taken off over the last couple of hours that haven't now taken off. They've probably missed their slots at the other end as well. So all of that has to be rejiggled, if you like, and reconfirmed as they try to find alternative routes and times for these flights. And you might just get flights that are cancelled altogether.
And an absolute bottleneck now of passengers if what we're seeing, and it did look like these people were directed by police officers. We did see 1 or 2 police officers telling those individuals to cross the road, to cross back towards Birmingham Airport, which we can see in the distance there. Yes, we can see some security guard there as well. It does seem as though these individuals have been told to head somewhere. We can only presume the airport.
OK, right, so I don't want to get ahead of myself then when declaring this all over. It might be you're right. They could be going to a holding area. So they were outside near the terminal building and they're now going to a holding area. We have to hope. Obviously, with the camera shot that we're seeing, we can't see the terminal building. I don't know we have direct control or ability to speak to the camera that could zoom out and perhaps give us a fix on where we are in terms of the... No, we don't. So we can't... We're reliant on the cameraman to, at some point, hopefully give us a geographic location in terms of where we are, in terms of the terminal building. Are people heading towards it or away from it?
Well, as it stands, Birmingham Airport haven't released any sort of update saying that people are being allowed back in or whether they're being told to stay away still. So at the moment, all we know is that the airport has been evacuated. People are being told to keep away. Perhaps, by the looks of these pictures, there has been some kind of development, could be positive, or they could be sort of moving on elsewhere.
And of course, if you've been affected or indeed know someone who has been affected by this closure at Birmingham Airport today, do get in touch. gbnews.com/your say is the way to get involved in the conversation. We'd be really keen to hear any personal stories that you might have of this closure today. But, Mark, of course, we're continuing to see a number of people, some of them clearly officials wearing bibs and the like, and others passengers. I mean, it does show the scale, the number of people who were actually evacuated in this evacuation.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's a busy airport, so, of course, there'll be lots of people there. I mean, there are hundreds of staff that work at Birmingham Airport as well, so they will have been... evacuated. They would have to be evacuated alongside the passengers as well. I'm just checking for any updates at all from Birmingham Airport, and nothing is yet to confirm that the airport is reopened, other than their previous statement, which was telling people not to turn up at the airport, because clearly turning up at the airport is just going to add to the backlog of people that they have to deal with.
And Mark, I can say in the last minute, West Midlands Fire Service has issued a statement saying shortly after 12:20 today, we were notified of an ongoing incident at Birmingham Airport. 2 officers are currently on site working closely with police, ambulance and airport staff. Local resources are on standby, ready to provide additional support if needed.
Yes, we're hearing as well that people that have been evacuated from the airport, we obviously saw people that looked to be in the sort of the kind of main environs of the terminal there, but others have been taken to the NEC, the National Exhibition Conference Centre in Birmingham, which is next to the airport, as a holding area as well.
OK, well, thank you very much indeed, Mark White, our Home and Security Editor. This is Good Afternoon Britain. On GB News, we're going to have the very latest on the fallout from the Chris Kaba case. The Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, has unveiled this presumption of anonymity for firearms officers subject to criminal trial. Stick with us.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, Italian wine in Britain is worth a whopping £891 million and can be described as a Prosecco phenomenon, apparently. So joining us now to tell us more about why these Italian bubbles are so popular is Ed Smith, the founder of The Emissary, a British-based Prosecco brand. Good morning, Ed.
Morning, guys.
Thank you for coming in, and you've done just as we asked. You come laden with booze and bottles and glasses.
Exactly.
So the definition of Prosecco, Tatiana, you were saying earlier, is sparkling wine that's been made in certain areas of Italy. Which areas?
Exactly. So the Prosecco region is northeast Italy. It's about sort of an hour north of Venice, foothills of Dolomite Mountains. Very, very beautiful part of Italy. Veneto, exactly. Well done.
Show off.
Well, I'm half Italian, so...
well, there we go. OK, you should be teaching me.
No, that's it.
So, yeah, so like Champagne, that has to come from the Champagne region in France. Prosecco has to come from the Prosecco region in Italy. And it's different to Champagne and other sparkling wines, like English sparkling wine, in that geography, like we just mentioned, has to come from that region in Italy. The grapes that are used are different. So Prosecco has to be at least 85% Glera, which are the native grapes of the region. And it's most importantly the method. So Champagne and English sparkling wines use the traditional method, where second fermentation, which produces the bubbles, happens in the bottle. Whereas Prosecco uses what's called the Charmat method. So the second fermentation happens in steel vats. It's a much quicker process, and that's why Prosecco is a bit more affordable.
So the Emissary is a British-based Prosecco brand.
Yeah.
So is it made in the UK?
No, made in Italy.
Yeah, that's why you can call it Prosecco.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can't call it Prosecco unless it's made in those two regions.
Great. So can we get stuck into some of these? That's the most important thing of this morning.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Good afternoon, Britain. Just gone 10 to 3. We're going to go back to the fallout of the Chris Kaba trial after Martin Blake, of course, was acquitted.
Yes, Blake could still be charged, apparently, with gross misconduct by the police watchdog, but that decision remains under review.
The officer is currently in hiding after police intelligence suggested Kaba's criminal gang had placed a £10,000 bounty on his head.
OK, well, we're now joined by youth worker Anthony King. Anthony, very interested to read your comments on this, reported in the BBC today. You suggest that some members of the black community are feeling traumatised by the verdict of this trial. Why so?
The challenge we've got is that historically there's been major challenges between policing and the black community. And again, I reiterate, historically, concerns around, when you look back at the Cherry Gross shooting, when you look back at John Charles de Mendez, Mark Duggan, it did bring up traumas for the black community. So when the outcome came not guilty, the initial views and text messages and correspondence I was getting from the local community is, here we go again, another black life lost. As quoted by the community, at the hands of the police with no justice.
It's difficult to look at this in sort of a particularly sympathetic lens towards Chris Kaba. After all, had he not died in this incident, he would have stood trial for attempted murder, for shooting someone in a nightclub. He's someone who's been to prison for years for stabbing. The first stabbing that he was convicted for was when he was just 13 years old. He's been convicted for attempted grievous bodily harm and was a linchpin of one of the most dangerous and violent gangs in the UK. Is it really right to suggest that somehow he was a pillar of the community?
I don't know anyone who suggested that he's a pillar of the community, and actually, for the criminal deeds that he's done, he should have been brought to account for it. He should have gone through the criminal process, because I would never advocate for anybody stabbing or shooting anybody. I'm absolutely appalled by the heinous and the criminal acts that Chris has done. But we're still dealing with the fact that you have a family that are grieving the loss of a son, a daughter who's lost her father. And, you know, these are narratives that have to be explained to the daughter as the daughter grows up. You've got a devastated mother and father, devastated family members. Based on the not guilty verdict, the family are absolutely devastated. And I would say I understand and empathise with their feelings, but that doesn't detach from the fact that this guy was a man that needed to be justice for his criminal behaviour.
Do the people you talk to still believe that this was a case of unjustified police brutality on the part of the police officer who's been found not guilty?
The community is divided at the moment with insight into the behaviour of Chris. There are many community members that are divided. My personal view is that we need our Met Police to continue to police in a safe manner. Then we need them to do what the Met Police have been doing, and I'm confident that in the near future there will be changes. And I'm also confident that trust and confidence can be built with the Met Police. But as it stands, look at it from a certain perspective. The community is grieving because of a loss of a young man, a loss of life. But that doesn't detach from the fact that the criminal acts need to be brought to, or it would have needed to have been.
The young life we're talking about, though, is someone who was perfectly happy to see other young lives snuffed out. Someone who tried to kill people, if we're to believe all of the reports. Someone who had stabbed young black youths before. Is there a danger here?
That's traumatising.
That his mother was trying to hide that past? Because then that creates a bigger disparity between one community talking about some person whom they do not know the full criminal history of, and everyone else having a different conversation. Is it wrong of his mother to try and hide that truth, to try and keep the media gagged on his criminal history?
I haven't spoken to the mother about that, and I can't answer. And I don't think it's fair to ask that question at this time, because the mother is still processing the verdict. Same with the father and same with the cousins. But again, you made an earlier point about him snuffing out or the potential of that. What I can say is this. In our country, in our beautiful country here in Britain, we don't have the death penalty. And we're looking at two issues here. One, his criminal behaviour that should have been brought to the fore. It should have been dealt with through the criminal proceedings. But we also have another situation here where we're dealing with the loss of a young man. We cannot detach from the fact that a man has lost his life and there's a family grieving.
Okay.
I will also say that all my thoughts and prayers...
Anthony, I'm very sorry. We'll have to leave it there because we've run out of time. But Anthony King, thank you very much indeed for coming on the programme this afternoon. Good to speak to you. Thank you for watching Good Afternoon Britain. Do not go anywhere because Ben Leo is up next in place of Martin Daubney.
This is the final week to grab your chance to win a whopping £36,000 cash in the Great British Giveaway. That's like having £3,000 each month for an entire year. Extra cash in your bank account that you can do whatever you like with. Make sure you don't miss out. Get your entry in now. Just one entry could make you the winner. For another chance to win £36,000 in tax-free cash, text CASH to 63232. One entry costs £2 £5 plus one standard network rate message. Or text BONUS to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Or post your name and number to GB08 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close 5 p.m. this Friday. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Jubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.